Before we begin today's video, just a quick public service announcement. It is important that all players jump up the available memory for the Java runtime environment by going to 3 separate places. When you first load the VASSAL program, go to File, Preferences, and Importer tab to jump up the initial and maximum heap size available for the Java runtime environment memory cache. There is a third, which has to be adjusted anytime you open up a new module, and I'll cover that next. Since MegaMek Empires is very heavy on counter use, it does require a larger memory size than, say, some of the other modules out there. Every cell, every biome counter, every tree, river, mountain, etc. is one of these counters and must be remembered by the game. So the last memory setting you need to change in every MegaMek Empires module, there is a different module for every planetary system, you must go to File and Preferences and up the available memory to the module itself instead of just the VASSAL program as a whole. I recommend either 10 by 24 or 20 by 48 to make sure you have enough memory to make future saves. Whenever you start a new game or load a saved game in VASSAL, the first thing you're going to see is this message window about a new session beginning and whether to save a new log file. Later on, the admin, myself, plans on automating some processes using log files, but for now you can simply hit No. So without further ado, let's talk familiarity and some of the functions of a typical MegaMek Empires module. Here we have the ASTA planetary system loaded, or the module for this particular in-universe Battletech system. And there are a number of different keys here right at the top. The first one you can see grayed out is the undo last move function. If you move a piece on one of the game boards, this will be available to you. So far we have not moved any pieces, so it is grayed out. The second button is step forward through the log file. There is a window here that is a kind of chat log file. I can type messages to another player I am potentially playing with if this was a kind of internet-based game, but usually it will just tell where a piece or counter was created on the map or where it has moved. Our third button here brings up the online game connection functionality. So here, this is over on the right side. This is not used for MegaMek Empires as we play by email, so you can simply keep this closed. The next button says Retire. It allows you to switch sides or become an observer. The thing is, for every individual module, there is only the admin, the player, and an observer role. And the admin role is locked out, so the observer and player role is more or less just the same, and is what you should have access to. Every module is unique to yourself, so you will only get a view of what your empire sees. There is no way to go into the back end of these files and determine other players' locations because they are not plotted in your save file or your module. Next here we have the planetary system map. So this would be for the ASTA planetary system, which is located not very far from Sol or Terra or the planetary system of Altair. There is a mini-map that works with this particular function, this particular map grid. And you can see here we have a number of objects on this map. The map size is 400 by 400, but going into both the positive and negative ranges. So if I use the mini-map, I can jump down here by making a simple click, and we can see there are some things on this map laid out. There is the option to take a picture of the entire map using this image, or this button here, but it will break the image into smaller chunks because this is a large PNG file otherwise. There is a button here to hide all counters on the map, so you can take a look at what the grid coordinates are underneath if you have such a need. There are some zoom options here, both increasing the zoom or decreasing the zoom, or finding a custom zoom width as you prefer. And you can mark all counters as moved or not moved by simply pressing this button here. So what is typically found on a planetary system map? Well, this is supposed to represent space. So at the 0, 0 coordinates, or near there, should be your system's star. In this case, Asta has a type spectral class K star, which is a little bit smaller than Terra's Sol. If there is a binary system, they might be located around 0, 0, but fairly close to it. Above and below are these funky looking images of blue and red. These represent your zenith and nadir jump points, respectively. There is also a green version of this, which represents the pirate jump points. So if a jump ship or warship is trying to jump in or out of the system, they will appear in one of these blocks here in a different system, and they can only leave the system by being in one of these colored blocks: pirate, nadir, zenith, etc. As you can see, there is a limited amount of space in each system for jumping in and out, and if you, say, leave a system here, you will arrive in the next system in that same location, but one solar system or one new module over. If something is in this space when you arrive, well, you materialize inside of one another, and bad things will occur. But we will talk more about that at a later point. You can see here that there are a number of planets. Asta 1, which its real name is Rena. Asta 2, which is the inhabited system, or the inhabited planet of this system, also known as Asta. In Battletech, the system typically takes the same name as the planet, the main planet. And 2A here represents one of Asta's moons, Arohina and Adele being the second one. There are more planets as we go along here. I believe there are 7 planetary bodies in the Asta system, and a number of them have moons. Some of these are canon, some of these are made up, but I am using one of the most realistic solar system generators I can, and then just adjusting things based on canon. So the information for Asta is more based on canon, whereas its neighboring planetoids are generally going to be more generated, but based on the size and information out of Battletech canon that the star and the main inhabited body has. Now, what information do we have on any of these systems? Well, if I highlight the sun here by clicking on it, I can hit Control and P, or Control and I, one of the two, and it will bring up a little information chart. You can resize this window and it will remember the size that you have left it from then on. So Asta is indeed a K26 class star. It has a reach charge time of 173.3 hours, although that will not be necessary for MegaMek gameplay. Our rule system is going to be different. And this is the XY coordinates on the Battletech universe main kind of universe map. And some more information about the star in general. This is also available for every individual planet by hitting Control P or Control I. I think it's Control I in this case. So you can see that Asta 1, or better known as Rena, has a system position of 1, a jump point travel distance of 2.79 days. There is gravity and atmosphere details and general temperature, as well as estimated population size. There are some other feature details, description details, and if found, there will be some history, usually taken from Sarna, I would likely guess, based on any planets. So we can see here Asta 2 has a lot more detail here. And the history here is got quite a lot of information, which is why this is so long, and the window has not been resized. But thin, breathable atmosphere, these are some of the different molecules that you would find, the year length and day length, cloud cover percentages here. We have a population of about 1.6 billion people on planet. And this gives you a hint on how big the map for the planet is going to be. So the Earth radii is what I use to match the size of the planetary map. So in this case, it will be a 830 by 830 map size for Asta 2 when we get to its planetary map. You might see that there are some ships in system here. We have the Westhoven Ascendancy, which is kind of the player we're viewing as. Here they have launched 2 Tomahawk aerofighters, medium-sized aerofighters, to identify some incoming dropships. You might notice that this counter has a white frame, whereas the other ones do not. That is so that this unit size formation can show up, that this is a pair of units, or a lance of aerospace fighters, if you will. You can change the colors of the frame on a given counter, but we'll talk more about the controls for that a little later on. You will also see that this counter has moved, as has the other counters here. We have a Zorp-Zan Industries dropship named the Destiny's Wish, and a Zorp-Zan Industries jump ship merchant class named the Nimbus 4. These, you can tell, are not the player that we're viewing as, because they are a different color. A player would be represented by, the player you're playing as is represented by white nameplate of the owning entity or nation. Yellow represents a unknown. Green represents a neutral party. Red represents hostile, and a light blue would represent an ally if you are allied with anyone. A good way to tell if a unit is not your own is you will also see a timestamp of when this activity last took place, when this unit was spotted, and if you are on a planet's surface, you will also see the direction it was last traveling in, north, east, south, or west. Also, around any given counter, you will see a equipment tag, so we know that this is a Manatee class cargo dropship. I can also use the counter itself to identify that this is a dropship, and C standing for cargo dropship. And last but not least, you can also add a tag here for a unique name or a higher formation level. But again, we'll look more at this when we get to a planetary map in just a moment. Before we move on to our next button at the top, the planetary maps list, I want to jump one over and cover the stellar object tiles. These are all the available pieces that you might see on a space map, and it is one of the only other buttons that, when pressed, will show a number of counters over to the left of the menu chat area. I can resize this so that we can get a better look at the list of objects here. We've got some of the various stellar classes, O, B, A, F, G, K, M, and supergiant red stars. Here is the icons for the Zenith, Nadar, and Pirate points. There are recharge stations that you might find around a solar system's sun from time to time. There are shipyards as well, which are the locations where jump ships and warships or any large spacefaring vessels would appear at for purchasing and deployment. There are some space stations which are kind of just going to act like human-made planets. And then lastly, there are a number of different planetary icons, kind of representing different large biome regions. So you can have planets that are largely caustic in nature as their primary territory biome type, and of varying sizes, large, medium, and small map size. Gas giants, naturally, as with Jovian subgiants, will not have any ground to land on, but ice planets are landable, although will frequently have just ice and Arctic and other forms of biomes as their predominant feature. Some planetary systems will have rings, although that will have very little bearing on our gameplay. There are Martian-style planets as well, reminiscent of Mars, and a variety of different rock-based sort of terrestrial planets, but usually without any vegetation. These might have sand as a biome as well, or might be a mixture of sand, rock, and other features. Lastly, we have Terran planets, which have vegetation. These can come in the form of blue-green, as with Earth, blue-red, blue-yellow, or just simply blue vegetation or purple vegetation. There are also volcanic worlds, which will generally be found closer to a system's sun. And last but not least, water worlds, where a large majority of the surface is of liquid water or some form of liquid. There are also moons of various sizes, which fit around any of these planetary bodies. You might also see asteroids, which you can potentially land on, but a comet will not be something a unit can land on. And below this is all of the different features you would find in Terra or the Sol's solar system. Next, let's look at the planetary maps list, the real meat and potatoes of any given MegaMek Empires module. When you click on this particular button, it will bring up a map grid much like the planetary system map, but only this one will be white to help you recognize that it is a planetary-based map system. You may need to look over to the right side of the map before you do anything and adjust the map size as necessary, because there may be some hidden names. In our solar system here of Asta, we have 7 planets and a number of different moons, many of which are potentially landable, so you can land on Asta 1, in other words, Rena. We can see here if we click on this and we scroll over, the map size for the planet of Rena is 590 by 590. That's based on its relative size in Earth radii. and we looked at Asta 2, the main planet in the solar system, populated planet that is. Its Earth's radii is 0.83, so it has a map size of 830 by 830. So when you're looking for your own empire, when you're looking for your own units, you must ensure that you have clicked on the correct map. So given Asta is the most populated system in its the most populated planet in its system, chances are you will be utilizing this map for most of your time in this given module. If you are on Groombridge 34, you will need to find the one that lists Groombridge 34. If you are on Tharcad, you will want to look for the Tharcad map. That does not mean that other planets will not have outposts and small amounts of civilization, but by and large, the largest map, or the one with the most population, will have the same name as its planetary system. You can see here that I have created a number of different dioramas based on the Asta 2 or the Asta planetary map, so that we can get an idea of what this program would look like in action. But before we discuss what's actually happening on this particular diorama, let's talk about some of the pieces that the diorama is made of. And we'll start with the biome tile, perhaps the most important piece of any given map. A biome tile is basically the given cell on a map that your units might be transitioning through or fighting over. They come in many different varieties, from Arctic and a canyon to different kinds of forest or grassland, to impact craters, lunar in the case of moons, or Martian in the case of some of the planetoids, different colors of sand, different types of trees, deciduous, coniferous, mixed. There might be a chance for a greater chance of tornadoes happening in a given location, or you might have urban or volcanic or swamp kind of wetland-based territory. So if we were fighting in, say, a tropical seasonal forest, and we had one of my own units here and an enemy unit here, the combat that would take place might have a larger degree of vegetation present, as this is a tropical area. It might take on a tropical theme if you have that installed in your MegaMek options. There might be a moderate variety of elevation changes, some small amount of cliffs, some small chance for lakes, very small chances for roads, and other features. We have a spreadsheet that the community is working on to balance these options. Whereas if we looked at a highland biome, this particular place might see less vegetation in the MegaMek battle, and a lot greater elevation changes, higher amounts of cliffs and craters, less of a chance for urban environment or roads, and less of a chance for lakes than, say, a tropical area or swamps. A cold desert, for example, might see a lot of sand-based of any variety of colors. It might have an average temperature of, say, -20 to +5 centigrade, versus the higher temperature of, say, a tropical location, which might be in the +10 to +30 range. I'm just throwing numbers out there. I can't quote what we have on our spreadsheet right now. But the particular biome found in any given cell is representative of the terrain you will be fighting on if you happen to have a fight in that particular cell for that territory. Next up, on a given planetary map, you might see a player territory color. This is represented by your faction. So our initial beta players, all 40 some of them, initially chose an RGB color, and that represents their empire. Any new found players will have to pick from one of the options available here. So you could look at the cyan color group and pick one of the various shades of close to cyan, and this is its hex value. And you will be using that from then on to represent any territory you have claimed. You could also go under the olive drab and pick any one of these colors as your empire's own. Here, the Westhoven Ascendancy has a baby blue style territory color. So this territory down here, the Westhoven Ascendancy has control over, and they have the entire population of New Hessen, 173 people, contributing to their taxes, along with the populations in these other cells. Cell has 2 given numbers in pretty much every cell, the bottom number representing the population living in that area and what they contribute in terms of taxes, and a cell coordinate at the top. So this cell is 621 by 214, and gives us an idea of where the location is on the planet's map. The center, or the top left, being coordinates 0 by 0, unlike the planetary map where the center is 0, 0. Besides the territory color, you also have highways, roads, maglevs, and rail-based transportation. These are going to have a bonus to movement on the strategic map, but it has not yet been flushed out by the community at large. But you can see here some of the road segments which can be placed onto the main strategic map. 3-way roads, 2-way roads. There are some options for bridges, so land-based units can travel across ocean or lake tiles as well, without need of a ferry or air-based transit to have them travel over it, or else they would have to travel around. This is an ice biome, but land-based units can travel on top of ice. But bridges are indeed a thing, and would show up on the MegaMek map that you are fighting over if a battle took place in that location. Same with roads would show up in a map if these were present on a given tile. Maglev, rail. We can see here on this diorama there is a railway heading into New Hessen from the west. There is a Westhoven Ascendancy train here, a passenger cargo train, called the New Hessen Line, moving down here for whatever purpose. And we can see that the counter has a light yellow color. This is your given save file, so you can color the different icons with a different background color if you want. The nameplate of your units will always be in white, as mentioned, whereas hostile units will be in red. So you can color the background color anything you wish, but more on that later. Next up, we have some object tiles which might show up on a given strategic map. Here currently we have a mountain with a letter insignia of M. There are lunar and Martian based variants. Mountains have a detriment, or they take away movement on the strategic map to cross through. In this case here we have crystal formations standing in for light woods. So if we fought on a MegaMek map, you would have some light woods, which would represent some actual groupings of crystal clusters in that area. The Ballardo ice fields are a part of the Belardo supercontinent on Asta and have some crystalline formations and large ice fields present. So passing through this particular map cell on the strategic map would take an additional 2 movement points to cross through it. Mountains are +4 and would have a +4m on the tile to represent that. A river would be +3r, given its letter symbol here. As with a heavy woods, it would also be +3hw, taking an additional +3 movement points to pass through. But where different planets can have a variety of different colors, we have some blue deciduous trees, some conifers, some purple conifers, alpine-based snow conifers, and some tropical trees as well. You can change your MegaMek themes as necessary to represent those if you so wish. These are the light woods varieties, including some mushroom trees. Further down the line, we can see objects such as towns. Here we have the town of New Hessen. It has an urban biome underneath of it, and we have a town ruins. This was an old town, but now has only 4 people living there. Perhaps it was destroyed during one of the succession wars or previous combat, or simply just abandoned. It is next to a crater here, a crater biome, so it is called Old Hessen's Pit. There are domed towns for some planetary systems where the environment, the atmosphere is poisonous, and there are equivalent urban areas here as well. The actual icon of the urban environment does not impart any movement penalties, neither does the town, but is a nice visual cue on the strategic map to be laid over urban biome areas. There is a city center, which is the location that will give a city its name and will not have a population. There is a capital city section, which is where your first city is, where your empire will spawn at. It can be changed later on if you so choose, and you can switch capitals for another town that you have claimed. But neither of the city center or capital city will impart any population income tax. There are some other object tiles which are not on this diorama, but which are deployment structures. Spaceports, for example, are very rare and few and far between, but the only location that a dropship or small craft can spawn at, much like the space shipyard in the planetary system map, is where a jump ship or warship will spawn from. Airports will be the location where conventional aircraft, aerospace fighters, or VTOLs will deploy from. Ports will be locations along a given body of water, a lake or ocean, where blue water naval craft will deploy from. Infantry barracks will have the deployment locations for infantry or battle armor. Vehicle bases will deploy any tanks, any Wiggy or hovercraft-based vehicles, and mech factories will deploy any battle mechs, any industrial mechs, or such commercial units, as well as proto-mechs. There are also MFB gantries. These are basically, think, a small structure that will help repair a given unit that stops at its location. And lastly, some crystals, which will fill in for light or heavy woods, and they come in a variety of different colors, much like the sand does in biome types. So all of these could be found on a map, strategic map, and impart such movement penalties or functionalities as deploying types of units. The last category of objects or items you might see on a strategic map is the historical, planning, or just in general different types of markers. Here we have a claim marker, which will be used more or less when you're attempting to claim territory for your empire. So here we might have say some infantry traveling along, and they might decide they want to claim this piece of land this turn for their nation. You can just throw down one of these claim icons to help the admin know your intention. Largely they're going to be used with VTOLs, which are carrying infantry, so that you can mark when the VTOL is actually stopping to claim some territory. But we will talk more on that specific circumstance a little later in this video. There is a pin marker which you can place down to identify a given location. The admin will be doing this as well. So here we have the Balado Icefield A4, a named feature on the planet. So you will see these in some cases as naming a given forest or location. You can place some of these down yourself if you wish to name a location. There are some flags which come in a variety of different colors, which serve the same purpose. You can plant a flag and name a given location, or put down a little rally point, if you will, like dust off site or nav this, and use these flags for those particular adventures. Next up, we have a historical battle marker. In the case that you have fought a large-scale battle and you want to remember its location and just kind of mark it on your map, you can simply drag and drop one of these on any given hex, and with a right click you can add a label to label the battle, or put down some additional information in text form. Next is a sensor ping. You can use this if you want to place where you think an enemy unit might be, but that you don't actually detect. Let's say we, as the Westhoven Ascendancy, thought there was another enemy lurking up here to the north. Maybe they're kind of up here. We could put a sensor ping denoting where we think a unit could be. We also have some further planning markers. So if there are a number of towns in an enemy territory that you have scouted before and you are aware of, you could label a target as a primary target, or maybe you could label a enemy force as a secondary target, and just use these to help plan offensives or other kind of engagements in wartime periods. You can also leave arrows for the exact same reason, plotting out a path that your units plan on taking. So maybe this Vulcan is going to go up and meet with the train and then follow the train on, for example. We also have some battle markers. So if we had a unit stop its movement and an enemy was detected in the next cell over, you will see the enemy unit like this. So the Skulker-wheeled scout tank has stopped here at the end of its turn, and where it is stopped, it didn't run into an enemy unit per se to start a battle, but it came close enough to detect this jump infantry squad and this locust. Whereas if this Vulcan had continued along a path and stopped here, and there was an enemy unit that was either in this map cell or had passed through this cell and it had intercepted it, that might spark a player versus player battle or a player versus AI, depending if there are bandits in that territory or not. And if there was a fight that was going to happen in MegaMek this week, you would see this icon placed next to your unit to let you know that that is where one of the battles is taking place. Lastly, for planning markers, we have some hazard kind of symbols. Biological hazard, combustible, corrosive, electrical hazards, poisonous hazards, or radiological. These will be intended to be used in conjunction with the biome tiles to have some additional effects, like infantry without combat environment suits would not survive in a poisonous environment, so they cannot take part in a battle. They cannot even enter that kind of a biome. Corrosive hazard: anytime your unit would travel through, say, a tile that has this feature, or perhaps some of the surrounding ones, it will take a certain amount of armor damage from this corrosive gas in the area, and that's kind of like a one-time event for every time you pass through a tile, regardless of combat. Other ones will help prevent the use of certain weapons. Much like underwater, you cannot use missiles or autocannons. Maybe you cannot use missiles in one environment, etc. These things are still being hashed out and planned out in the biome spreadsheet. Now, before we move on to talk about the Battletech counters, the last major component of any given kind of map, there are a few more functions here that I wish to showcase, just like on the planetary system maps. Namely, we have a camera which can take a picture in smaller chunks of the entire main map. There is a zoom slider which you can also adjust to a custom level. And there is some show and hide piece buttons. Namely, I can hide all of the pieces on a given map and just see the tile grid underneath, and make sure that the grid coordinates are correct, because all of these grid coordinates here on the biome pieces have been entered in by hand, and there could be a few that are incorrect. So you can always hide everything and double check to be absolutely certain. I can show and hide player territory colors all at once. That way I can just see the biome underneath very easily, or any other given features. I can just simply hide the Battletech counters so that all player controlled units can be hidden or shown at once. And you can see any underlying other elements, like the target marker icons, for example, or to better easily see a population level in a given cell when there are a lot of units stacked on top of one another. That's another reason I have to use this function quite often. And lastly, we can mark and unmark all units on this map that have moved recently. For the final map toggle feature, let us now turn to the second diorama I have set up, namely the toggle biome textures and solid colors. For every biome, whether it is deciduous forest, mixed forest, urban, garden, we have some beach sand and beach rock shingle, or lake, etc. You can have the option of having these wonderful textured images or a solid color image. When you're dealing with the map zoomed out, it is sometimes a lot easier to look at when we are just using solid colors. Some people find having a lot of texture in one place is a little bit hard to see. It makes the map a little bit too busy. So you can always toggle this feature using this button at the top. Now, let's get into the Battletech counters. Before I actually go into the list here, there is something that I will have you aware of. It is the shortcut keys and control list. This predominantly deals with the Battletech counters themselves. Pressing this icon here will bring up a pop-up window with a number of different controls. So looking at this, you can use the Alt key and the single quotation mark together to cycle a counter's operational status. Right, or the semicolon and Alt key to cycle the operational status to the left. Well, what is an operational status, you might ask? Let's look here at this SSI Swordfish, a Neptune-class submarine for the Nox Confederation. You might notice that there is a little green rectangle above the right top side of the counter. That is the operational status indicator. Green means it is fully functioning. If I cycle one over, we can get yellow, which means it is substantially functioning, taken a little bit of damage. Red would mean it is at like a critical state or marginally functioning. Gray would mean it is pretty much out of action, barely holding itself together. Blue would mean a factory fresh unit, so something that has never taken damage and has just been deployed. And lastly, pink represents kind of an unknown status. So you can cycle between these when you are dealing with your own units, and there is also a white frame variant of each of these as well if I continue to cycle through that listing. The next shortcut key available to us is the clone selected counter or delete selected counter. These are also accessible via a right click on any given counter once you have it selected. You can see here a counter is selected when you have a red square around it. You can right click and get a number of these options as well, including clone and delete. The next one is the open counter unit information window. So some players may not like having all this text surrounding their counters, although the nameplate of the owning empire is going to be mandatory. These other ones do not necessarily have to be used. You can click on a counter and hit Control-I, and this will open a information window much like with the stars and planets on the planetary system map. And you can add some information here, including the owner, yourself, the type of unit. You can add information on who the crew is of said unit, and these windows will stay resized to how you leave them. You can type in what higher formation they belong to, so in this case this Marauder 3R might belong to the 34th Company of the 2nd Battalion of the 1st Regiment. You can type that in here. You can leave the unit designation or call sign AUX1 in that location. Lower formation, if that is something you need, you can fill that out. Status, you can also have the operational status and so forth put there, or some notes, one engine hit, low ammo for autocannon, etc. You can type its movement speed in here in case you forget what its movement profile is, so that when you're trying to make movements on the strategic map, you can just refer to this. You can keep a record of that unit's kills and any other notes on performance or so forth of that unit. And this will stay attached to the counter for as long as you have it on the map. The next available option is the toggle moved or not moved. This can be done via the right-click menu system as well, or Control-M. This button here again would toggle the movement for every piece on the board, not just one single one. You can rotate units either clockwise or counterclockwise using Control and the squared brackets. This really isn't something that I find quite useful. You can see here how it's rotating around. The frame, unfortunately, is staying put. But if there's something off about a unit, perhaps you might still want to rotate it for some reason, just to help draw attention to it. So I left that functionality in. Next up, we have the shortcut commands for the formation layers. These come in two different color varieties, black and white. The black one uses a combination of the control key and various other keys. A to toggle the layer on or off, the right or left arrow buttons to cycle the formation, either increasing or decreasing in size, or Control and R to reset it to the individual unit formation. The white formation layer is the same pretty much, except it uses the Shift key in conjunction with A, the arrow keys, or R in order to activate or disable the layer, cycle through it, or reset the layer in turn. So just to give an idea of what this looks like, we can grab a simple light aerospace fighter here, drag that onto the board, and if I wish to turn on the formation layer, I can, the black one, I can hit Control and A. You might notice nothing has really changed, but if I hold down Control and start cycling with the arrow keys, we have squad level, or a pair of units, a trio of units, or a lance of units. I also have my custom formation lance insignia here, which is looking like an actual lance from a horseback riding soldier. We have reinforced lance. This is a alternative configuration for a flight. Usually a flight would be considered of just 2 units in terms of aerospace, but I also have this insignia available as well. Then you've got your reinforced flight icon, company, reinforced company, battalion, reinforced battalion, regiment, reinforced regiment, and then going further up into the brigade, division, corps, and army levels. Then cycling over to the clan unit structure, so you have 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, and next is a star. After that, we have an insignia which generally would be used with a blank counter, such as this. This would be the symbol for a what are these? The Nova. Basically, essentially a star of mechs mixed with a star of battle armor, hence this darkened gray component to the counter. Cycling further on, you could have a the alternative Nova design without the battle armor kind of insignia showing up. We have a binary, a supernova binary with the battle armor kind of crosses showing, or without it. Then a trinary, a supernova trinary with or without the colored battle armor cross. Next is the cluster icon, and lastly galaxy, before we get into the Comstar unit formations. So this would be a level 1, a level 2, a choir, which is a special type of level 2. Then you've got level 3 before switching over to gray colored squares in the center for level 4, 5, and 6. And then that would take us all the way back around to a single unit. And of course I can use the Shift and A to turn on the white color formation for on a darker background, and I can cycle through this as well, and use Shift R to reset, or Shift A to shut that form of formation counter off. Next up, we have the multitude of shortcut commands for the various background color options to each counter. For example, we can see here on the diorama that the Nox Confederation is largely using an orange background in some variety of colors. There is a civilian craft here with a dark green background, and the Gallant Republic unit that is seemingly passing through this territory is using a purple background. Counters come in two different varieties, either a black or a white version, and that is not to see the frame. This is talking more in line with the information in the center of a counter. So we have both the black variant of the Aerospace Fighter Light and the white variant of the Aerospace Fighter Light. Now, if you're picking a brighter color or a lighter shade closer to white, you will likely want to go with a black counter. If you are going to be choosing a background color that is quite dark in color, you will want to use a white counter. You cannot switch the information out between these. You will have to pick from these options from the beginning, or else input all of this information around the unit again, or the special information in the unit information window. Now, how do you activate these different background color options, and what do they look like? Well, much like the player territory colors, each category has a number of different colors that you can cycle through. So, for example, if we open the shortcut key command here, we could go with the dark cerulean background color option by selecting a counter and pressing Alt, Control, and L all together. So let us do that. We'll use the white counter here, Alt, Control, and L, and we now have the main cerulean color option highlighted, but I could also, using the shortcut keys of Alt and up arrow or Alt and down arrow, cycle through the different color options that are within this dark cerulean category. Going up usually means the color will be less gray and more vivid, more bright, whereas going down will be closer to a shade of gray or darker. So let's give an idea of what this looks like. We're at the dark cerulean color right now, but if I hit Control and down, or Alt and down, sorry, that would give us the brightest color in this color category, and if I continue to press it, we will have different variations of dark cerulean color, getting slightly grayer as we move on, until it eventually wraps back around to the first color option we saw, the dark cerulean, which is kind of a mid-range of all of the available colors. Now, if we look at the shortcut keys, dark cerulean is a darker option, so all of the darker shades here, save one option, is a combination of Alt and Control plus a letter. All of the very light shades are a variation on Alt and Shift, and the brightest, most vivid colors are Alt, Control, and Shift together. Notice there are two kind of categories, the vivid green category and the burgundy category, that have some break away from this traditional patterning here due to already used key combinations. You might also notice that there is a section on tints of gray, shades of gray. So there is talking in RGB color system, 240 by 240 by 240 for 240 red, 240 green, 240 blue, would give you this kind of light gray color, whereas 16 red, 16 green, 16 blue gives you a dark gray. A gray color is anything that has equal parts red, green, and blue. Now, if we go into one of these options, let's take
Alt-Shift-6 for 192 here. And we'll use the other one, the black Aerospace Fighter Light. Alt-Shift-6. We can begin cycling through some shades of gray. There is not a lot of distinction between these, but the standard counter, when you first pull it out of the menu system here, is a 192 gray, a kind of middle gray. Actually, let me immediately retract that statement. It is a 128 gray, not a 192. 128 being the middle ground between 0 and 255 in terms of the full range of the RGB system. So what is the last shortcut keys for these kind of counters? That would be the formation layer, or the height layer. So to toggle the height layer on and off, we have the Alt and Home key, and then you can increase the counter height layer by using the Alt and Page Up, or decrease the height layer by using the Alt and Page Down buttons. These functions, the height layer, are needed for any aerial-based units, such as aerospace fighters, conventional aircraft or VTOLs, as well as any dropships that are, or small craft that are coming to and from a planet going through the atmosphere. So if I select one of these aerospace fighter counters here, hit Alt and Home, you will see that the layer has turned on, and right now we have a gray upward pointing arrow and a 0. This would mean that the craft in question is actually on the ground. It has landed. It's at 0 height. If I increase the layer, Alt and Page Up, we have a number 1. It is like a height of 1 off the ground, followed by heights 2 and 3. Those you can see all have the similar color, dullish blue, but if I jump up to height level 4, it is a brighter blue and shares the same blue as heights 5 and 6. And once again, height 7 has a even more vivid blue, but this time with white colors for the number and the arrow, along with heights 8 and 9. The idea behind the various colored heights is 1 here, 1, 2, and 3. The unit might be still fairly low to the ground, where you would expect anti-aircraft fire to definitely come into play, where there's an easy chance of having a crash into the environment, like tall mountains or so forth. This is also at a height for bombing and strafing runs, whereas heights layers 4, 5, and 6 might be more reminiscent of higher altitude dogfighting, where ground-based anti-air may not function in terms of tube-related guns and so forth, whereas 7, 8, and 9 might be high up atmosphere, where conventional aircraft, VTOLs, cannot go, but aerospace fighters may, and they would be the primary defense at this kind of a high altitude. In terms of air units, aerospace fighters, VTOLs, conventional aircraft, all of these will need to expend 1 movement point to go up a level, or 1 movement point to go down a level. The idea being that dropships need at least 9 movement to leave planet and get into atmosphere, which can take a couple of turns per se. But once in atmosphere, or once in higher orbit, their movement across a planet's surface will drastically increase, making the long distance trips much shorter. The different height layers, though, do include a few more options. Namely, if I continue cycling up here, we have another option where we have a unit on the ground that is with the phrase on loading. So maybe this is an aircraft or a VTOL that is carrying infantry or battle armor. In this case, it is on the ground and unloading its troops. Or, if I continue cycling, a craft is on the ground and its infantry or battle armor are outside of the craft and claiming the territory for your empire. Or, the next cycled option, the troops are trying to load back in a craft that is on the ground. So how this might look is maybe we have a VTOL. Let's pull one up here, like a cargo VTOL. It is taking some of its movement, and it would take, let's say it wants to claim this map tile here that has a population of 4. It would need 1 movement to move into the map tile. Then it would, if we say it was already at a height level of 1, it would need 1 movement point to go down and land and unload, 1 more to claim, and another one yet to load the troops back up and go at a higher level to continue moving on. So again, you might have a craft that is a VTOL trying to capture multiple map tiles in a turn. So it might go along here and want to land and capture this territory. So it would need 1 movement to move into this tile, then a second one to move into this one, plus 3 more to capture. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it can move on. But we still want to show that we want to claim this hex, so we could go to the planning markers and use the claim icon here. So remember, we've used 5 movement so far. Maybe we still want to claim this one as well. We've already used 1 to move in, so another 3 more. 5, 6, 7, 8 to claim before we move on. And maybe this craft only has, say, 10 movement. So it might use its 9th bit of movement to land and unload, and its 10th movement to land and be in the process of claiming. So we would end up leaving the unit like this, showing that it is landed on the ground and it is 2 of the 3 movement needed into claiming this tile, whereas it also attempted to claim these ones as it passed over. You saw for a moment there that we have another icon which briefly flashed up. This is often to do with infantry or battle armor. It does not have to be necessarily used in terms of with a VTOL or a conventional craft of some sort. But if we bring up, say, some basic foot infantry here, let's just choose the laser variety. I can pull one onto the ground, and let's say it was going to be traveling with an APC, such as this infantry group is here, that is loading onto an APC. Maybe the infantry is already on the APC. Well, I also have a mounted tag for this. You would have to activate, obviously, the height layer, even though infantry would not be flying, per se. It is the mounted status. You could just activate the layer and hit Alt and page down once, because this is the last option under the height layers. So this could be put in with the APC and travel with this group, and it would look as though you have one unit that is the SRM platoon is in the process of loading, and we have a laser infantry squad maybe, or platoon, which is already mounted. Next, I would like to cover some different options in terms of how to display your units on the actual strategic map. Let's clean house a little bit and remove a few of these icons. You can notice that I can select multiple objects by pressing and holding Control, and they are all highlighted, and I can just use the delete command or any command on all of these all at once. Likewise, I could open and close this stack of units, or select one unit out of a group and perform an action on that. But I can select multiple units and have them move together, or I can expand and collapse a number of units that are resting on top of one another with a simple double left click. But you'll notice a lot of these units on this diorama. The Partisan Air Defense Tank is just one lone tank, Hawker 3. The submarine here is just one lone submarine, the SSI Swordfish. We have a lone Hummingbird VTOL rescue titled Osprey 1, its call sign, and it has a height formation layer turned on, showing it is one height above the cityscape. But over here we have a lance of tanks, 4 Bulldog medium tank standard, known as Leopard Lance. Maybe the 5th Lance out of the 1st Battalion of the 1st Defense Regiment, per se. And we can see that they have been given an alternative information tag of patrolling. Again, all of these things that we've been talking about, all these key commands are also available through a right click, except for you can see that these have to do with some of the color layers. But the color layers, you need to memorize these controls for, or look at the shortcut control list. But this is just one unit. There's not a stack like we have here of the SRM platoon following along with or being loaded in this hover tank. It is only one counter representing 4 tanks. Now, what happens if you want to split this force up? Well, you then need 4 distinct counters. Maybe you have 2 go one way and 2 go the other. You would have to seemingly delete this counter and replace it with other ones. You'll notice, those of you who have received maps already, every one of your counters, every one of your units has its own counter. You can create these stand-in counters that represent more than one unit and have those on the map. And we have what are called inventory hangers up at the top. We have one for the admin to store his own things away from your prying eyes in, and a player hanger. So I can click on this and it would open up. Notice I did resize the map so that we have a way to move units back and forth across these different vantage points. But I could simply trade these counters on and off the map as needed. So I could pull this battalion, this counter representing a lance out, and I could have stored individual counters for each one of those tanks in the Leopard Lance, and I can bring them back onto the main map, have them stack up nicely, and all of their information is saved. I could hit Control and I and bring up all of that information, like their kill feed, their crew, etc., without having to remake the counter every time. And I would not have to re-enter all this information and remake the counter every time, because I can just pull them on and off of the safe space, the inventory hanger here. And now I could have the whole units move forward 1. Then I could just select, say, 2 of them by a click and drag, or one of them by a click and drag. Here we go, and drag 2 of them one way, and collapse and drag 2 of them the other way. So that is one way that you can showcase a unit splitting up, or having less on the map. You can have such higher formation counters as the lance here, or a counter representing an entire company of armor. Notice it's not just this lance of heavy tanks, so I could swap out all of these plus 2 more lances for a company-based counter, or a battalion-based counter. Notice here that these kind of line up perfectly to showcase what a continual higher formation here. Or another thing I like to do is you could have all of these units grouped back up again. I could go in and toggle their movement and turn it off, and I could simply put the lance counter on top of them. So now if I hover my mouse over this area here, it showcases everything that's in this pile, and the one on top is the one on the far right. So we can see here that the lance icon is on the top. Again, I can double click on this to expand it, but I could just have all of these counters traveling together. The lance representative counter, and then all of the individual units traveling as a stack. So that's up to you. You could travel them this way, or you could pull out all of the units and save their counters in a inventory hanger and pull them back onto the map if you're splitting up the lance in some future mission type. But this way you don't have to re-enter all of these counters in each time. You can see here we have a number of other counters also stored in this inventory panel, and you have space, quite a bit of space, to store a lot of counters in. They do not stack. As you might have noticed, I pulled over this stack of counters. They do not stack in the hanger. They have to be kind of separated out. You can kind of rearrange things in the hanger to make it more visually distinct if you wish. But as soon as you bring a stack of units into the inventory, it will separate as them being side by side. Of course, you can just close the hanger and keep it for a rainy day. We are now into the home stretch, I would say, and let's finally take a look at the Battletech counters menu and the different options of pieces that you can pull out here and represent on the strategic map. Under each category, you might see that there are some basic general options, and then weight-based options, so light, medium, heavy, assault, etc. The general options are so that you might have a mixed group, say a battalion or company or wing of aerospace craft, and some heavy, some medium, some light. So you can use this kind of general option to get an idea of a mixed formation, of a higher formation traveling together, where you could also do, say, a medium flight or medium wing of aerospace fighters. So under aerospace, we also have the command flight option. So maybe you have one airframe that is in command of a wing of other ones. You could haul this out and use that as a command icon. Under armor, there are a number of different subcategories. There is your standard armor, breaking it down into generalized tracked, wheeled, and hover variants, of course with the black and white center for the counter. There are light, medium, heavy, and assault, different versions for these, plus super heavy for the tank category. Next is APC, which is the same as a tracked, wheeled, or hover-based unit, but with the crossed bandolier cross of an infantryman from like Napoleonic times, which represents the NATO counter for infantry. So a infantry counter mixed with a tank counter is essentially your APC. An IFV is very similar, except with a single bar to the left side, which represents the presence of a main gun. So an IFV is better than an APC because it's usually much more armored and armed, representing an infantry fighting vehicle rather than just a personnel carrier with a couple machine guns. The next level up would be a battle armor carrier. So here we have a solid black bar to the left to denote that this unit is carrying battle armor versus regular infantry. There are amphibious-based units. These could be units that have a flotation hull or some other ability to get across bodies of water. And again, coming in assault, medium, heavy, light variations. There are anti-armored units. These are units that are kind of like your Stug from World War II, or the Hetzer, assault guns that do not have a turret, just a forward-firing main gun where you would have to reposition the hull to get a decent shot, per se. That is represented by this kind of upside-down V to the tracked-wheeled or standard hover icon symbols of the armor. We have military police, represented by an MP. Mine clearing units. Clearing units have this kind of triangle with a stick representing like a plow plowing through the ground, whereas mine laying units have sort of a mine symbol to them. Next is recon. That is, the recon is represented by a single slash on top of the tank-based icon. It means a recon armored unit. And then we have special forces represented by SF. Battle armor. There are a variety of different types of battle armor. Air assault has a kind of small V shape at the top. These are essentially infantry or battle armor, if they are air assault infantry, that are being carried by helicopter. There is also an air assault recon variety, so recon units being carried by helicopter. Airborne would be units that would either jump out of a plane, like a paratrooper, or are being flown in by a plane and then fight after they get on the ground. Again, these are available as infantry and as battle armor. You can have airborne recon battle armor, amphibious battle armor, battle armor mixed with artillery. There are some battle armor that have a tube-based artillery, some standard battle armor, border patrol. So this is simply a self-designating description here. Maybe you have a battle armor platoon that you are going to station on the border with another territory. You can use this BOR designation to give them some extra special meaning. There are combat engineer battle armor, some command battle armor elements. You could have some civilian or police or law enforcement battle armor with the little shield icon. Naval marines that are black water in space marines versus blue water with an anchor for battle armor. Military police, again with the MP. Mine clearing, again CLR with a little mine, or mine laying, which has a mine with a little line over the top. Recon battle armor, again with the vertical or the diagonal slash. Special forces, which have a sub-grouping of air assault, airborne, both of those in recon varieties as well, amphibious, standard, or recon. VTOL capable battle armor. This is essentially a battle armor riding on, say, a microlight. So they are traveling via a small VTOL themselves. Not really a thing in Battletech just yet, but it's here for future completion. VTOL mounted battle armor. So these are, think the difference between air assault and VTOL mounted. This is like a long transport, like a Chinook carrying a lot of different troops, where those troops cannot fire from inside of the craft, whereas an air assault unit would be someone kind of sitting on a skid or hanging off of the side and able to use their weapons while in flight. The next category, we have battle mechs, again with several subcategories. Just your standard battle mech, light, medium, heavy, assault, or super heavy being denoted by a C. There are command formations to the battle mechs, so you could have a command mech for a battalion or a command mech for a regiment. Land air mechs are a combination of the star from an aerospace fighter and a mech symbol. Special forces mechs. There are military police mechs with the MP. There are industrial mechs with the I, or proto-mechs with a P. In terms of black naval units, you could have a small craft smaller than a dropship that could be ferrying troops or battle armor. Assault dropships with the symbol of an A. These are used kind of like pocket warships almost. Focus on heavy armor and heavy weaponry as opposed to carrying anything in terms of mechs, tanks, infantry, etc. Although they might have some shuttles or a fair amount of marines on board for boarding actions. There is the B symbol or B letter to denote a battle mech carrying dropship. C for strictly cargo. There is the CV, which is the carrier version of a dropship. An H for a hospital dropship. Notice I also have a red cross on this. A Q dropship, or an ambusher dropship, is something that is disguised as a cargo dropship, but when you get near it, actually has a lot of weapons and special features to make it into more of an assault role or surprise. There are different jump ship counters. The 1 denoting it has 1 docking color, 2 for 2, 3 for 3, all the way up to 10 using Roman numerals to showcase how many docking colors it might have. Then we get into the more classic warship types. You've got your survey warship. This is jump capable, as are any warship. A corvette. Survey ships usually don't carry any dropship colors, but a corvette might carry 1 or might have none. Then you have, with increasing size and complexity, destroyers, DD, escort destroyers, DE, frigates, FF, assault cruisers, battle cruisers, command cruisers, heavy cruisers, light cruisers, and regular standard cruisers, as well as transport cruisers for carrying lots of infantry or battle armor. Battletech does not necessarily distinguish their warships into these different cruiser classes, but you might feel the need to. That is why they're here. A battleship and a carrier warship, and lastly a space station icon. In terms of Blue Navy, we have a large variety, even though MegaMek does not support many of these just yet, although I am trying to convince the administration that they are possibly something that we should look into. There are aircraft carrier types. You could have escort carriers, considered usually smaller, fleet carriers, which are your larger carrier warships, helicopter carriers, light carriers, which are similar to escort carriers, seaplane tenders or carriers, which are AVs, or just a general carrier icon as well. There are surface combat types, which is again your battleship, your arsenal ship, which you can look up what that is on Wikipedia. Kind of a throwback to like the older ages of sail. Same with a monitor ship. An arsenal ship is, I think, actually more along the lines of very missile-based, whereas a monitor is a gun-based platform. You can have armored cruisers, battle cruisers, command cruisers, guided missile cruisers, heavy cruisers, hunter-killer cruisers. Hunter-killer being a type of ship usually traveling in packs to hunt down enemy submarines. Light cruiser class, regular cruiser class, a cruiser with a helicopter equipped, a scout cruiser, and then we have similar instances for the frigates, including a radar picket frigate being one of the new categories there, and similar categories for destroyer, with destroyer leader, destroyer mine layer, and destroyer minesweeper being new categories under that class. Then you have surface effect ships, which have an area between two kind of little hulls that water still typically travels through. These are very faster kind of ships. Just a general surface warship icon, and then we have some speedboats and speedboats with rigid hull. Various types of submarine, including fleet, mine laying, attack submarines, auxiliary with cargo, ballistic, so carrying long-range missiles or essentially ICBMs. You have coastal-based submarines like the small P-boats that the U.S. used in the Pacific, the pig boats. Guided missile submarines, you have one that is equipped with like a diesel engine or an ice engine rather than fusion. Hunter-killer, so anti-submarine submarines. Midget submarines, nuclear or fusion-powered, which is typically what most of them would be generally. Submarine oilers or tankers, which are carrying fuel to other craft. Something the Nazi party and in World War II used in conjunction with their other U-boats. Radar picket submarines, and just a general counter for those. We have a large selection of amphibious warfare counters, so landing craft, landing ships, landing platforms. I will not go through all this list other than to say that you can at your own leisure, but field hospitals, protomechs, tank-based, there's a lot here to play with. These are something that I envision you could make in MegaMek currently, but there are not many options available now in terms of cannon units. There are patrol, coastal, and river defense type units, so like smaller patrol craft and patrol boats and torpedo boats, and all of them with their letter designations. You can see there is some variety in terms of what the counter looks like. Hydrofoil is another common type of unit in Battletech. There are expeditionary support types, so you have ships that act as mobile field bases for other ships, essentially. So transfer docks, things that can carry damaged craft from one place to another. Or we have some fast transport vehicles, those surface effect ships and so forth. Combat logistics, so these are cargo-based ships carrying everything from ammunition and combat stores to bulk cargo, like crates, general stores, vehicle cargo with a little vehicle icon, replenishment tankers, so these would be oiler tankers or tankers carrying fuel, gas, diesel, petrol. Fast combat support ships, again replenishment oilers, and airframe carrying transports, so carrying replacement helicopters or planes across an ocean or a lake to be used at a runway somewhere else. Mine warfare style ships, not that degaussing is really a thing, but included for completeness. Mine layers and sweepers and countermeasure ships. Mobile logistics, so some destroyer tenders, patrol craft tenders, and other types of repair vessels for other sea-based units. Submarine repair ships, seaplane repair ships, etc. Support types have a crane ship, used for potentially salvaging units on the sea floor, or transferring cargo from one ship to another. Some miscellaneous auxiliary ships, some environmental research or oceanographic research ships. And hospital ships are here with their own kind of unique color scheme. Barracks ships for carrying a lot of infantry. Battle damage repair ship, another type of repair ship. Again, the difference of these different classifications is down to what you want to call it, but they would be a repair ship for different naval units. Same with the salvage and salvage rescue units. Service types, you might have an auxiliary floating dock. These things don't actually have propulsion. They kind of set in a bay or a harbor and are a repair installation. You can have large or small ones. A lighter is like a barge. That's the British term, I believe. So you can have an open barge, a railroad barge for carrying a train across a large body of water. Vehicle barges or lighters, aircraft carrying barges or lighters, or even just acting as a landing pad. floating cranes, a covered barge for storage. We have ferry boats in case you have units that are going to carry across tanks, mechs, etc., although the landing craft can also be used for that purpose. Ambulance boats, dredges for reaching the bottom of a seafloor again, lighters or barges for carrying fuel, pile driving. I've got harbor tugs, water carrying barges, anti-aircraft platforms on a barge, or anti-ship based weapons on a barge. Again, not likely to be used, but here for completion. Law enforcement type. So you could designate a ship as a Coast Guard ship, or a customs service ship, or a police service ship. PB standing for patrol boat, whereas a V indicates a police unit, a Z indicates a customs unit, or a W a Coast Guard unit. That is the same with aircraft when we get there. And then there are some civilian units, such as the fishing vessel, leisure craft, variety of cargo ships and ferries and the like. After the Blue Navy, we have the conventional units. So we have VTOLs, a general military VTOL. Military units tend to have a solid black icon, whereas civilian units tend to have a black frame to an icon, but it is not filled in. There are attack or strike VTOLs, symbolized by an A, cargo, with a C and a line underneath, denoting a support unit, jammer-based units, maybe using ECM, patrol-based units, trainers, utility units, again classed as support. There are ASW, or anti-submarine warfare VTOLs, government, medevac, recon, search and rescue, and units for carrying special operations forces, or VIPs. And then again, we have civilian-based law enforcement. So V for police, W for Coast Guard, and Z for customs. And then a variety of selection of civilian units as well, including hospital, passenger, etc. The airframes are fairly similar, except for there are more of them. So there are AEW, or like AWAC, Airborne Early Warning Units, as a unique call-out here for those, and tanker-based aircraft as well, plus B for a bomber. Law enforcement available as well, and civilian units capable. There is the VASSAL, VSTOL, capable aircraft as well. Think the modern-day Osprey, which can land like a VTOL, as well as a plane. Other units in the conventional and VTOL category are the wing and ground effect, or WIGI style units. Again, military or civilian based, or law enforcement. And there is an other airframes category for airships, which again are not currently in MegaMek, but who knows if they will show up in the future. Military and civilian balloons, airships, and UAVs. Our infantry have a lot of the same classes as the battle armor, so I'm not going to run through everything here per se, but under each subclass, air assault, you will see that there is it broken up into anti-aircraft, or AA, as a support type weapon, autocannon as a support weapon. There are flamer platoons or squads that you can get, Fléchette, Gauss or Gauss, the grenade launcher support based platoons or squads, lasers or support lasers, less than lethal, so think tasers and the like, long range missile, machine gun, MRMs for medium range missiles, plasma rifle, particle cannons as a support class, recoilless rifles as a support class, your basic infantry rifle. And again, each of these have kind of lettering to denote that type of unit. Rocket launchers as a support class, shotgun-based units, submachine guns, short-range missiles, and those are also support, along with target acquisition gear, or TAG, as support. You can see here the air assault has both foot-based infantry and jump-based infantry as a variety of options. The air assault recon, however, does not have all of the different gun options. You can just kind of list that yourself, what they have as, say, jump platoon SRM, but have it labeled as a recon unit. The same would be true for the airborne or paratrooper. We have all these available weapon types, but not for the recon. You can just label it as such. There are amphibious / diving or frogman scuba based infantry, again with the same wavy line and the infantry based line with the different letters to denote the different types of weapons system being used. There are anti-aircraft artillery based infantry. So you have the cannon based or tube based infantry with a single circle, and to denote anti-air it is this kind of hill kind of icon here. These could be foot motorized with a solid line through the center, motorized alternative, which are 2 wheels to the side. In some instances this denotes bicycle based, but in our purposes it is an alternative for motorized. And mechanized, having a single line here. There are anti-aircraft artillery as missiles. So again, that is the same hill-based symbol to denote anti-air, but instead of a circle dot for tube, we have this shape here, an upside-down U, to denote missile. And if it has some chevrons above it, it is a multi-missile based system. Think the difference between a single Arrow 4 launcher or an LRM-20 launcher. There are also just generalized anti-air infantry. These might be individuals within anti-air rifle or just a very small caliber weapon piece in general, or a very small single shot kind of rocket launcher. Anti-armored infantry, so the similar upside down V that we saw before. Again, these could be transported via foot, motorized, mechanized, or even something that came off of a VTOL mounted. We have Arctic-based infantry, which has the cross and the designation for the type of weapon in use, but with a simple kind of ski symbol added to the counter. Your basic foot infantry. A beast mounted, which has a slash similar to recon, but the bottom half of the field is in a dark green. Bicycle-based infantry, which in our case is the other form of NATO counters take for bicycle infantry, having just a single circle underneath the crossed bandoliers of a standard infantryman. In our case, battle of MegaMek, bicycle infantry will be infantry that have a bonus of another added movement to symbolize that they are faster moving infantry. We have border patrol infantry with the BOR designation, just up to you whether you label them as this versus standard. Combat engineers as a different type of infantry. You could have demolition based engineers, which have a TNT and a what is this called? Something that you would have like on a crane arm, wrecking ball. Yes, that's it. So that's the symbols I put on either side of the E for engineer to denote demolitions based infantry. You could have just standard engineers. Here we have some XCT based with the planetary symbol to show that. But a standard E would represent just regular engineers, and then bridging infantry with a kind of bridge icon added to the engineering E. sometimes on the side, sometimes directly above. CRC is crowd and riot control, kind of infantry. Think police riot troops. DET would be a detention-based infantry squad or platoon, perhaps guarding a prisoner of war camp. We have field artillery observers. These folks would kind of radio back the progress of artillery, where it actually lands, and adjust fire as needed. Field artillery infantry, so think infantry that have small arrow-based artillery or multi-based missile artillery like an LRM-20 kit. Field tube artillery, so infantry with a small sniper, thumper, or long tom piece. Field guns, so there are a variety of different field guns. Our infantry backed with the anti-armor kind of symbol versus the anti-armor infantry here. Firefighting infantry with a firefighting cross. Guerrillas, which have the word guerrilla over the bandolier. Horse cavalry, which is similar to beast mounted but with a solid black piece to the lower portion of the divided counter. Again, horses and beast infantry are not in the game per se, but included for completeness sake. HQ formations. Jump infantry, as denoted by this kind of little jetpack sort of symbol here. A law enforcement civil police. You can also have sniper teams, which have this sniper symbol added, or SWAT, which have the word SWAT on. Again, we have naval marine infantry in terms of space and blue water with the anchor. General just mechanized infantry, so infantry with small vehicles to help them move a little bit quicker. Think very small APCs and the like, or I like to think ATVs or 6x6s or like an Argo, that kind of level of mechanization. Medical formations, so we have combat medics in a variety of forms. MI for military intelligence troops, MP for military police. We have mine clearing and laying infantry, again with the CLR or the mine with the line above it. Mortar-based infantry, which have the circle with an upward pointing arrow to symbolize a mortar. Motorized infantry with a line through the center of the counter, or again I have the alternative with the two circles to the right-hand lower corner. Mountain infantry is denoted by a small triangle, a isosceles triangle at the bottom. Just standard observers, maybe they're there to watch combat between two other people and make sure things do not get out of hand. Recon units, again the single slash signals-based troops for communications purposes. Just a team of snipers, so a regular infantry cross mixed with a little icon here for a sniper. Special forces and SF. VTOL based on a microlight, so we have a very small icon here of a helicopter mixed with the crosses of the infantry. VTOL mounted, which has the big kind of VTOL shape, but with the crosses of the infantry over the top, and the XCT, the xenoplanetary condition trained, or I would also use this for infantry that have hazardous environment suits, so dealing with anti-radiation, poisonous atmosphere, these kind of things. We have the Joint Support Branch, which has a variety of different vehicles underneath it. So air defense vehicles in terms of tracking, so radar tracking units. AAA or anti-aircraft artillery missile-based or rocket-based. Again, a circle with chevrons over the top. The missile-based can also come in multi-missile with the chevrons over the top. Anti-aircraft tube artillery, which is just a kind of center black circle denoting tube artillery mixed with the hill kind of symbology, and a track or wheel or hover symbol. Border patrol based armor. Chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear vehicles. So these units would be going into combat with those hazard suit based infantry. We have command vehicles for armored formations. We have drone carriers. So these carrier icons have a double line to the left and are the control units for drones, which are represented by this kind of black trapezoid, upside down trapezoid. You can have a converted drone, so a tank that no longer, it was meant to have a crew, but is converted into a drone. That would be this symbol here, a trapezoid that is not filled in. And I also included UAV drones, VTOL drones, and other options here. Engineering vehicles in terms of bridging, drilling, dozer, demolition, earth moving, so think a backhoe or so forth. Generalized mine clearing engineers or mine laying engineers, and recovery based units in terms of engineering. Ordnance disposal units or EOD, again just a self-designating unit here if that's what you want to use it for. Field artillery observer vehicles and firefighting vehicles. MFBs, these are units that can repair other units, mobile field bases, or just a standard maintenance unit. We have two types of medical units, the MASH unit or the medevac based unit. These kind of typically would retrieve a soldier from the front line and then take them further back to a MASH unit where the surgery theaters and so forth are. Military intelligence vehicles, you have observer vehicles, postal service, psych ops for propaganda, quartermaster vehicles. A lot of these you would not necessarily be needed, but you can denote them yourself for fluff and role play. Here we have our rail units, monorails, and train-based units. Before we get into artillery, so the standard missile and multi-missile, mortar-based artillery, self-propelled tube-based artillery, including sniper, long tom, thumper, signal vehicles for communications, and then we have the different varieties of NATO supply classes. Class 1 being rations, denoted by a kind of half moon. Supply class 2, clothing and personal equipment, which also has the quartermaster symbol. Class 3 is fuel, petroleum, oil, and lubricants, as denoted by a funnel, and I also include those letters. You can see the class type by Roman numeral in the side. Class 4 is construction materials for maybe building shelters or so forth. Ammunition is class 5. Personal items, class 6, denoted by a little person. Major items, so think very large sized items, so big sheets of armor, maybe a small pillbox kit or something of the like. Medical equipment and consumables is class 8A, whereas class 8B is blood and blood components. Class 9 is repair parts and other components, probably one that you might rely on heavily in a military. Non-military materials or civilian affairs-based materials is class 10. Then we have other vehicle types as surveillance vehicles, survey vehicles, topographical and geospatial survey vehicles, transportation-based assets for just carrying people from one place to another. Think maybe like a bus or a 20-ton truck or for carrying just inventory, or a jeep. Things that don't necessarily have a weapon system. And then for other options, financial services vehicles, judge advocate general, meteorological, mortuary or grave services, personal services, public affairs, religious vehicles, etc. Again, included for completeness and for fluff-based purposes. Lastly, we have installations with some subcategories. So you have command center-based installations at the Army, Corps, Division, Brigade, and other based levels. Installation being a small black bar above the counter but below the formation layer. There are joint support branch installations, so one's for air bases, a kind of transportation symbol with some lines denoting runways, ammunition production, ammunition caches, blacklist sites, ones for forts, and many, many more, including rail stations and training camps, again, used for fluff purposes. Other facilities, so aircraft production, bridges you are going to see on the map from time to time, Coast Guard facilities, dams, emergency operations facilities, engineering production facilities, firearms manufacturers, you name it. I've got quite a few listed here, including prisons. And lastly, turrets. So if you come across any turrets that you capture or purchase for in an urban center, each turret kind of has either the ability of being a single gun, a dual gun, a triple gun, or a quad gun of that type. So here we have a single mech mortar 1, as denoted by the right side's Roman numeral of 1, whereas a triple would have a 3. So this is 3 mech mortar 2s on one turret. So I could go into ballistics and find a triple AC5 turret. So it's one turret that has 3 AC5 guns built into it. And there are many different turrets categorized by cruise missile, ballistic, energy, missile, and what have you. And they all have their own little icon, as you would see in, say, MegaMek. And there is a special Calliope turret as well, some grenade launchers as well. And a clan-based versus inner sphere. Clan-based has a C to denote clan and a blue line near the bottom to help distinguish those. Support types also include anti-missile systems and laser anti-missile systems, ECM and active probe-based bunkers, C3 based bunkers, and you name it there. The last two categories include just unit strength counters, so that you can use these as a way to have a multi-role force. So I could have a brigade that includes mechs, tanks, infantry as a combined arms, and I could add some fluff text around this, but not necessarily need a symbol in the center. And all of these are available here without the need of activating a layer. And also it's a reference just to know what each of these formation symbols mean. If you don't know, you can come here and take a look. And alphanumerics, so we have all the letters from A to Z. We also have the numerals, 0 to, I believe I went up to 31, because Battletech is in the 31st century. And Greek letters, so alpha in capital and alpha in lowercase. So if you know your Greek letters, you can go alpha to omega, but I have also included even more Greek letters, which most people don't know of. So there's a smattering of those following the regular listing. And that is pretty much all of the Battletech counters. So we only have a few last topics to go. To finish off our tutorial, let's talk some notes. The next button on our control panel up at the top is the Notes button. This opens a small window which you can expand at your leisure. It should remember the size, but you can type some notes which are visible to all under scenario or public. You can have some private notes which are just your own, or even some delayed notes that are revealed at a certain time. So if you just want to keep yourself apprised of goings on or save anything in your game file, you can simply leave that here, or communicate with the admin. And lastly, we have some dice buttons, which are hopefully fairly self-explanatory. Flip a coin, D2, result of 2, D3, result of 1, and so forth down the line. So you have the option of up to a D100, and there's also a 2D6 option here as well. I hope that's covered everything. I know this has probably been a rather long-winded video. If you have any questions, feel free to email the admin at any time at megamek@gmail.com. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you on the battlefield.